is the first keynote speakers that we have here in front of us. And Risto had such nice thoughts in the beginning about our theme, that is on the boundary. And that is also the title for the first keynote speakers and for our first discussion. As you heard, On the Boundary is the title for a book published in English in 1966 in USA. And the author, as we heard, is the famous Lutheran theologian in the 20th century, Paul Tillich. And it was translated to Finnish in 1973 with the title Rajalla. And that's why we are the Finns have been talking here about on the border also. Not only on the boundary, on the border. And we are here in Finland today in the border between East and West. We have a cultural line here in this country also we have two different cultures in Finland, the Eastern and the Western culture. And this theme is quite interesting. And we are so happy that we have here two very intelligent, very intellectual theologians who are also very practical. They promise to be very practical too. And we share this, that they know better each other than I know them, so they will share their introduction.
So good afternoon, it's so nice to be here. So we are supposed to be the serious people, and after that you can continue to have fun again. But obviously we will do some serious talking also. I will talk first, but very first I will introduce MariAnna Auvinen. She's a Lutheran pastor, but she's also docent of systematic and ecumenical theology at the University of Eastern Finland. She has been doing many kinds of things as pastor, as scholar. She was in Botswana, sent by the Finnish Mission Society, and but she not only did her practical work in Africa, but she also wrote her dissertation on African wisdom and Lutheran theology. It's in English and available from the publisher Brill. And then when she came back, she was later General Secretary of the Finnish Ecumenical Council for many years. So I know her from many contexts, but we have been actually talking together in different countries, before the pandemic in Estonia and after the pandemic in California, so we are kind of used to presenting something in common. But that's my presentation of you.
Well, thank you, Risto. So I come from the east, from the Karelian part, and you are coming from Helsinki, but originally are you coming from more from the west or from Helsinki? Helsinki is the city where you are going to visit then also during this week. Risto told me not to tell you that he is really a famous fellow and professor. So whenever I meet my friends and colleagues abroad, they know Risto as well. So Risto has been a professor of ecumenics from 2001, and you have been the head of many academic projects, and that's why you also know and you have been taught And this weekend, they had a celebration at the Helsinki University in the theological faculty, promotion celebration. And there were 5 of his brilliant students, doctoral students, who got their hats. In Finland, we always get our hats then after doctorating in this promotion. Very, very nice celebration. And Risto lives in Pakila, where I also used to work as a vicar for a short while. It's a beautiful little part of Helsinki with beautiful houses as yours, your houses as well, with a lovely garden. What I think is very good for you to know, he has been writing in Finnish on hope. This is actually the first book, academic book, on hope. Risto is using Kantian theory of philosophy there, but everyone can understand. It's well-written book, and it really gives you hope. So please read it. I hope it's also in English after a short while. I hope, because it's rare book.
Right after this conference.
Yes, right after this conference. And it talked about climate as well. So, but now I let you to continue. Thank you, Risto.
Thank you, Mari. So this book came out in January 2020, and when it had been out like 1 month, the pandemic started, so there is not yet anything of the pandemic in the book, but maybe my work after the publication of this book has very much also been doing with the hope in the time of pandemic, and more recently hope in the time of Ukraine war. So these are the kind of serious topics which I will little bit reflect on in the following, but we will just speak like maximum 20 minutes, and then we will have broader discussion. You will be visiting University of Helsinki, and you will see and hear more of our institution there. But let me start by saying something very contextual and how my own history has been in the last 2 or 3 years, because I think that's essential for the more theoretical reflections I'm going to make. So, as probably in most academic institutions, all of our teaching moved to online in March 2020. This was not so much planned, but luckily we are a rather technological country here in Finland, so all students have laptops and almost all teachers also, so that kind of technical readiness to move to online teaching was not a dramatic technological challenge, but it was a kind of mental and psychological challenge, because here in Finland we kind of survived through the long and dark winter, expecting the spring to come, and especially the student unions and student activities are concentrating to the months of April and May, and they are long time preparing the 1st of May celebrations, which is the most active student time here in Helsinki, and all that was suddenly cancelled, and eventually also the graduation ceremonies, which most of them take place in March, in May or early June, they were moved to online. Doctoral defenses, which are a big thing because they are kind of public occasions, also they went completely online, and this situation continued more or less for 2 years. And I think we are still kind of recovering from this difficult period. I would say that the teacher did not have such hard time because teachers are by definition kind of little bit introvert persons who like to stay with their computers, but for the student it was a kind of dramatic change because nothing like this had happened, and in Helsinki it's really the big thing to have student ceremonies and student groups and a kind of personalized teaching. And we are now in June 23, and I still have the feeling today that University of Helsinki is still doing this recovery. Since September, last September, we have moved more or less to normal activities, but when I had my courses last winter, I first announced that I will now do again normal classroom teaching, and maybe half of the students were extremely happy, and that's glad. We have been waiting for that. But then maybe 1/3 of the students was saying, we don't no longer have student apartments in Helsinki, and couldn't you do the online option also? Or we are working and we are now used to this online, and maybe 20% of students were like totally missing. We don't know what happened to them. They never kind of returned back to the normal classroom. So what I decided is that I said, okay, I can have hybrid teaching, and maybe in the very beginning I also do my planning so that you can see in Teams and Zoom. But then in the spring I continued also so that my laptop was on, but I kind of attended the students. I tried to get almost all students to the classroom, but for those who so wished, the laptop was open, so at least they could hear and little bit make notes. But I still see that like in January, maybe still 1/3 of the students was doing the courses online, and even now April, May, some individual students still. But maybe the worst problem had been that we have simply lost students who have disappeared, and there is a kind of confusion how to continue. Should we go back to the pre-pandemic time, or should we do some kind of permanent change? Let me say that some teachers have been also so happy with this online method and the ability to stay at home that they are not so willing to go back into the classroom, so because they like to stay at home. This is even more problem in the smaller universities of Finland, where teachers not necessarily live in the same city where their students are studying, and then this online option is kind of tempting. So if we look at the kind of numbers, the numbers don't look so bad, because actually the number of student credits in the 2 years of pandemic, they remained more or less the same. So there was not a big drop. This was a surprise for us, because everybody was complaining that the kind of quality of our teaching is not so good as it was before. But nevertheless, the number of credits continued, and somehow the whole society continued astonishingly well. Of course, Finland did better than many bigger countries in this pandemic, so the measures were kind of accepted, and the whole society moved to this new and unexpected rhythm. So it was a little bit surprise for many of us, so that at least on the surface level things continued online rather well. Also the number of graduations, it dropped, and people now say that we will see the drop in the number of graduation only this year and next year, because the disappeared students do not come back. But where people see this effect of pandemic massively are all kinds of student psychology and counseling experts who have a lot of new people trying to find time to discuss their personal problems and problems of loneliness and other psychological problems of various kinds. So this is clearly a sign where you also see in terms of numbers the kind of new problems of this situation. All parties still complain how the community spirit has eroded and also disappeared and how difficult it is to rebuild it. So I was for 80 years what we call inspector of the Theology Students' Union, and I was also normally taking part to their festivities. And I ended my term 2019 just before the pandemic. And now, but I little bit try to follow how the festivities come up again. Now this year, 23, it's already going rather well, but 22, the numbers were still rather small. And I would still say that the better half of the students are doing pretty normally, but the other half is still suffering in many ways. And of course, as you know from your own work, the war in Ukraine has created all kinds of new anxieties. So we are kind of recovering from this pandemic problem, but if you are fragile, your psychological capacities are not so keen on taking all kinds of new troubles. I was very kind of I thought that the theme fragility, which appears in the title of this meeting, is very good topic in the sense that we are dealing with the kind of fragility of persons, how you can cope with difficult situations. So I have now been going to conferences again quite actively actually during the last years, and of course I share my stories with my colleagues in Europe and America, and I was in South Africa also recently. It seems that similar kinds of stories you hear everywhere, but then when you speak of solutions, you have here very different measures taken. Some want to continue very stubbornly as earlier, returning to the pre-pandemic normal. But then there is also the other extreme, that especially poorer institutions and institutions in which the students live in a great geographical area have sometimes, rather often I think, gone to completely online syllabus and online education. And I think this is a great danger for academic education, and it sets new boundaries. It seems that the kind of campus education is little bit becoming a kind of luxury or the kind of upper class education, and the online education is the method of poorer institutions. I think here we are establishing a new boundary. But then, if I think about broader perspective than my academic perspective, it seems, and this I hear from various countries, that somehow the entire work life is changing. And if you are a young student who sees that mom and dad have been working at home for the last 3 years, and especially if they think that, okay, if you are upper middle class and if you are kind of expert profession, and then you can work from home. So why should me as a student leave my home and go to some campus if the kind of rich and nice people stay at home and do their work from the laptop? So that the model of kind of establishment and the kind of new normal that people can afford to work from home affects also the students and creates some kind of strange new things. So in the very age where your kind of building your social skills is extremely important, you kind of refuse to do this, and the role of home suddenly increases, and the role of home as place kind of grows, which is very strange in many ways, because it affects not only this student life or campus life, it affects all kinds of things like traffic and infrastructure, even commerce, so how you build new supermarkets, or whether you just buy all your food so that some person is bringing them into your home door. This also means that the role of technology increases in so many ways, but I kind of tend to see, so I mean, we have rather bright students at the University of Helsinki, but this doesn't mean that they would all be technologically advanced. I think there are great divisions. Even some very talented young people are not technologically talented, so they would rather, they're kind of extrovert and socially oriented, but they don't like to work in everything with emails or through the Zoom. And there we have a kind of boundary, invisible boundary, that technology increases, it benefits some special people and kind of privileged people who are skillful in technology, but so many others who have some other extremely important skills are easily left behind in this. So this is my kind of a diagnosis, but I'm trying also to offer some theological concepts. I will not speak very longly at length on hope, but in my 2020 book, I am kind of challenging the old perspective of Jürgen Moltmann and many others who had a kind of linear concept of hope and the optimistic concept of progress and the idea that the future is better than the past. There are some important books. The Swedish Archbishop Antje Jackelén wrote in the time of pandemic a very important book of hope, especially important because Sweden suffered much more in the first year of pandemic than Finland, and I was very taken by her book. I also edited a small American volume where Jackelén and me and many others are writing on hope, so there is some material in English available, but we are all now saying that we are not so much, should not so much think of hope as linear progress, but we should think about humility, sustainability, and how to cope with uncertainty. How should we have like new virtues like perseverance and patience, which may be more acute than general optimism and progress. As Mari said, I am using in my book Immanuel Kant's so-called canon of reason, very old thing. I was kind of uncertain when I wrote on this in my book, but many people have kind of reacted positively. Kant is saying that hope can easily be delusive, but Kant pleads for the human right to hope. But he says that you must first have the kind of pursuit of knowledge, you must be educated, you must know what is going on personally. And then the second step before hope is that you should commit yourself to moral action. You should work personally for the good. And only after you have this knowledge and personal moral action, you are kind of, you have the right to hope. You have the kind of possibility of real and committed hope. I'm a little bit discussing that with the view of climate change and the idea that when students, for instance, try to eat vegetarian food or not travel so much or do some first-person involvement, I'm saying this is extremely important because hope is not such thing that you just start from nothing, but you should first have knowledge about what people need, and you should act personally for your personal good and for the moral good of the society, and only after that you may hope. We just had this weekend our doctoral conferment ceremony, and we gave doctoral hats to young doctors, but we also created some honorary doctors. And one of the honorary doctors, which created quite a lot of public discussion, we gave the honorary doctorate in theology for Greta Thunberg of Sweden. And there was quite a lot of public debate whether it's proper to give this to some 19-year-old who has not even yet finished her school. But on the other hand, there was a lot of positive voice that in a time like this, somebody who is such a critical voice and speaking for the climate, you should, and she was herself quite positive in receiving this doctorate, and she said she was just doing her school exams actually, she couldn't attend personally, she said a video greeting, and committed to that, but I'm kind of, I don't go in much detail to this concept of hope, but my own Kantian position is that it should be kind of action-oriented hope, but hope in patience and perseverance and humility rather than linear progress. Another concept which I wanted to mention is the concept of vulnerability. Vulnerability and fragility are quite closely related concepts. And I have been much influenced by my German friend Heike Springhart, who used to teach in Heidelberg, and I have been also working with her quite a lot. She's now Bishop of Bayerische Landeskirche in Germany, but she has written extensively on this topic of vulnerability and also fragility. As you know, probably, in security and military studies, vulnerability is something which you need to avoid, your weak point through which the enemy can attack. But in psychology and leadership studies, and now also increasingly in theology, of course in theology the problems with wounds have a long history. I don't go into that now, but theologians have also adopted this a little bit more psychological notion. It's a kind of positive concept. For instance, in leadership studies, people say that if you want to be a good leader, you must have some vulnerable places and spaces. If you are kind of Iron Man, you are not going to manage as a leader. You need this kind of openness, empathy, which go together with the ability to be vulnerability. But then there is this kind of discussion, Heike Springhart is extensively discussing this, that it's different from fragility. Fragility is something that there is a threat that you are breaking down, you need support, you need help. Whereas in vulnerability, this very thing that you are vulnerable may also be a good thing for your psychological development, because your capacity to empathy and your capacity to openness is related to this being vulnerable. Of course, it's not very easy to always make this distinction, what is fragility and what is vulnerability. And of course, vulnerability may also be a very negative thing, like in military studies. But I think it's something that if you are discussing hope at this very day, with pandemic, with war in Ukraine, with climate change, if you want to speak of hope, you need to speak of first-person action, moral action, but you also need to have these concepts like patience, modesty, which especially the Swedish Archbishop Emerita Jackelen has been proclaiming, but also I would myself like to subsume many of these concepts together with this concept of vulnerability, that if we want to have hope, if we want to be supportive of other people, if we want to be leaders who communicate in the spirit of openness and in the kind of situation of uncertainty where we don't see the vistas for the future, we should not say as university teachers or leaders that we know everything, we go to this direction and the university will thrive and flourish. But we should as leaders see that we are also affected by this situation. We are vulnerable to all kinds of things. We need perseverance, we need patience, we need humility, but maybe that is something where we can develop, where we can keep our integrity, and where we can also have some kind of hope in this difficult new situation. So, thank you.
So thank you, Risto. It was really, really interesting. Do you know that Steve Evans is talking a lot of vulnerability? How do you pronounce it? It's difficult. Vulnerability, anyhow. So, and reason from the margins, which I thought that I'm saying something of today, is also looking from that perspective, the whole theological ideas. Yeah, thank you. It was really, really interesting. So I said also to Lisa that I'm not using this topic on the boundary, but I'm talking about borders. But then I began to like it. On the boundary, mind, nature, fragility. And I found this picture, which I took to this topic, and I started to think of the asylum seekers. In 2015, Europe got, I think, 5 million asylum seekers, mostly from Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And everything was changing. Everything. Our normalities were not anymore there. There were people who were disturbing us, our peace, our money. They wanted to eat our food. They wanted to take our jobs. There were kind of disturbance. And they came, they flee from wars, they flee from violence. And we wanted to shut down the doors. We didn't want to take them here. And in 2015 I started as the General Secretary of the Finnish Ecumenical Council. And I was astonished because it looked so alike what we were doing, what they were doing in Southern Africa in the 90s. So similar, so similar. Unconscious racism, abundance of people. And so I began to like this word, boundary, because there are always people on the boundary. We are on the boundary, but there are always people who need us on the boundary. So we were working with the churches and with the archbishops towards human rights of the asylum seekers in Finland. But we had only 35,000 asylum seekers, so they, like in Germany, there were much, much more refugees. But we couldn't handle these 35,000 people. Now we get 50,000 from Ukraine, and now we are opening our doors and our houses and our jobs, and we want to support. They are coming from neighborhood. They are white, they are easy to handle. And we should do that. But what then, when this climate change, refugees are coming? They are coming from Africa. I don't know if there is anyone from Africa here. No hands. In Somalia, the situation is really, really difficult. Hundreds of thousands of people are fleeing from home. They don't have food. So those people are now struggling, who are not responsible for the climate change. And in Finland, we are decreasing our development. I think kind of it's a shame. It's a shame. This icon is drawn by American Catholic brother, and you can imagine that either you are in this chain or him, either one. Humanity is something what we don't own ourselves. It's a common thing. It's something that we are together, human beings, not alone, together, all of us. So there are ecumenical documents which were warning about the situation. They didn't know that the war is coming also to Europe. They were talking about wars in Africa and so forth. They were talking about the poverty, inequality, and so forth. And they are very strongly addressing that we have to convert. Pope Francis is very good at this. All Christians, we have to convert. WCC, it's the only hope is to convert, to change, to make changes. And then this Laudato it's for all people, not only for Christians or ecumenical churches or whatever, but for all people we have to convert. And why I took them here and why I was putting this beautiful bougainville here is because of the titles. They are very serious talks, but together towards life, joy of the gospel, or then we are praising you. The names, they are like flying with that hope. I really liked on hope, the topic. They are flying with the hope, with joy, with life, and with praise. And I think that is the kind of correct way of doing changes. Together Towards Life is saying that the biggest problem is division of the world, to those who have and to those who don't have. Those who have access to systems that lead to one's rights, freedom and individuality being affirmed and respected. That is the position we everyone we need and want. That is position for all people. But then, in the margins, it's growing part of people who are in the margins. And TTL, Together Towards Life, is saying that the mission of the church is not anymore to take people from the margins to the center, but to rebuild those walls, rebuild, so that we all together, like climate change, all together we are working towards a better world. It's easier to say than to do. The systems of thought that are captivating, these are very familiar to you. You have been working with this, I think, for decades. Paternalism, patriarchalism, racism, discrimination, casteism, greed and exploitation. So there are systems that keep status quo in the center, and like Pope Francis is saying, that we are throwing some people out. So they are outcasts, the poor. And we are throwing also the climate in a way, our nature, Mother Earth. She is the poorest of the poor, as Pope Francis says. Anyhow, so how do we discern and unmask to fight together, we have to work together, everyone, the poor and the rich, those in power and those powerless. I was thinking of these myths. There are negative myths, lots of them, like those which justify bullying someone at school. She's like that, he's like that. It justifies us to bully people. Or then, this is good, Africa is poor. It isn't. It's one of the richest continents in the world, with gold and diamonds and minerals and everything. Only the pockets where the money is going, they are the wrong pockets. So, kind of awareness when people are talking about history, that history is written by those in power, kind of awareness that we are not allowed to talk about other people, negative things. Onera Oruka was saying once, African philosopher, that what is going to happen in the Western societies? They have these big libraries, they have these computers, they know where the knowledge is. But with us, the knowledge is in our mind, so in oral system of giving knowledge to the next generation, we are all the time, we have to be aware. So what happens to Western people? I think that is a good question. But awareness, we have to be aware. And when we are aware, then what do we do with negative and positive moods? I'm looking at Lisa because of the time. So, but I still say that in contemporary time, negative moods are like we can't do anything. Professor Marko Kurmala, who is a scientist with climate, is saying, we can. And the myth is we can't do anything. But what are the positive moods that would lead us for tomorrow? And the last one. This way of looking theology is from contextual theories. Theology as science, theology as wisdom, and theology as praxis. And science analyzes, describes the world. Wisdom tries to find the inner path to God and oneself. And praxis is a method of change in the world. So I was listening to this idea of actions, what Risto was talking about, and I was thinking of this praxis. I think we need this all, real science, not opinions, to lighten our ways forward. Wisdom, faith, hope, inner space. We need that. And then praxis, commitment to our students, to our congregants, to the poor and those who don't have anything. We need them all. Thank you.
Thank you, Risto and MariAnna, sharing your thoughts. I first give you both room if you have a question for each other. So before I give the room for your questions, I think there are some questions and opinions here in the room.
I have a nasty one, but I know that you are capable to. How do we hope when we see populism growing, or how do we? I didn't tell you that he has been also researching on populism. So how do you think that we have hope with populistic winds and winds in Finland, for example?
Yeah, in this book on hope, I treat populism as backward-looking hope, as a kind of hope from nostalgia, that you are looking from some past which probably never existed, but you are longing back to it. We are in Finland now right in the government negotiations, and it's very likely that the populist party will be in the next government. 3 years ago, I was quite much against having Finnish populist party in the public debates. For instance, the leader was giving a talk in our church day, and I wrote against it. So because on the model of German and Swedish churches, but maybe now I am thinking more in this Kantian way that this kind of praxis, common praxis, assumes that in a small society all powers must be working in this praxis. So now I am not very much in favor of them, but I think that if you are dealing with populism, the way of drawing a boundary and closing them on the other side of the boundary is not the method, but you should engage in a kind of common praxis. But of course that may mean different things and it's different, but that's just a short answer. Maybe my question in return, this is a question which I have been thinking about already before I saw your slides, is that I think I understand something of this science and I understand of praxis, but this wisdom is very kind of tricky. When we have this wonderful ethnic music from 2 academic students and the songs were also addressing nature and addressing kind of inner wisdom and things like that, I thought that this is something where theologians should work more. So I see among young people this kind of desire to it's difficult to say. I wouldn't like to use the word spiritual, but somehow spirit-oriented or spirit-containing forms of life. But it's very difficult for an academic person to pinpoint what that is, and if you have some wisdom on this side.
In contextual theories, they say that Augustinus is, for example, more, he was not taking, because he had the same idea as Descartes had, that because I doubt I exist. But he didn't turn to that road, to science, but he turned to try to find peace. And this trying or tending to find peace is something that you, like that Luther, also Augustinian monk actually, was trying to find God. And this divine, how do you find him or her or it's like Africans say, how do you find God? That is a tricky question, but this spirit form of theology, it has experience it sees yourself in a holistic sense, your experience, your context, the people who are around. But it shouldn't say goodbye to science or realities. It shouldn't. They should be kind of together, because if you do science, that is like I see it like as a light towards where to go, but then the wisdom is something what is inside. But I was doing from African theology my thesis, and the book is called African Theology as Liberating Wisdom. So it combines together with praxis and liberation theology rather than science. But my method was scientific, and I was so happy that the guy who was arguing with me was saying that you didn't lose the soul of the African soul, and I was really, really happy for that. So I can't explain more, but there's some perspective. We need them all, I think.
I think in this room there are lots of wisdom.
Yeah.
And therefore, I will open the discussion to this group. And please, there we have a box with a microphone.
Is this a microphone?
And he shows how to use it.
Oh, does it work?
Yes. So, who would have idea, questions, or thoughts about this subject that we have been talking this afternoon? Anyone? Don't be shy. Yeah. There is some question. Yeah, you have there.
Well.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I am Nikolai. I have been the chaplain for 24 years in Copenhagen. We are very privileged in Copenhagen and rich, but I think just have one naughty question. Isn't one of the problems you are addressing also capitalism?
Yes. Do you want to say first? Do you want to be first? Yes, I say yes. We had conference Mission of Money in 2014, and we tried to find with economists kind of solution, because now we are really Pope is right. Our capitalistic economy is throwing one part of population out, so the outcast is a good name for that, but we shouldn't. But it's such a big and slow way to find something new instead of that. But there was one capitalist, Vesa Kanniainen, professor, who said, "Oh no, it's not the system. You have failed in the churches to talk about the creed. It's a sin." So it's difficult to say whose fault is it, but the system is throwing part of the people.
Of course, academic people should also a little bit irritate the audience and be a little bit counter-current people. So I think we are all here because of some good things in capitalism. So we are here not from really poor countries, we are from market economic countries and rich countries, and I am a little bit hesitant to begin to criticize capitalism, so because I would be probably nothing without capitalism. It's also that I lived my first 31 years very much in the shadow of Soviet Union, so I kind of the alternatives of capitalism do not somehow, I don't find them so attractive, so let's put it that way. So very much depends on capitalism, but also I think it's kind of intellectually honest to give some support to it.
And then some intellectual, honest questions I know there are.
Okay, you hear me? Oh, that's good. 4 years ago, we had our CEUC conference in my town, Neuendettelsau, the Augustiner Hochschule, and there was Jürgen Moltmann talking to us. As I understand it, Moltmann sees the reason for hope very Christologically, and he talks about resurrection and these things. Where do you say, well, what's the reason for hope for us? Where's the reason? Why should we hope?
Of course, as a systematic theologian, I also have lived my entire career in the shadow of Moltmann, and it's kind of impossible to write anything of hope without taking stance to Moltmann. And as most of you know, it is not only his 64 book, but his whole 60-year-long career in which he constantly takes stance to developments like ecology or feminism or democracy in Korea or whatever. So he's, of course, you cannot make this a kind of either-or choice, and maybe the kind of modest, but for instance, I had in my slides one paper which I published in the American journal Theology Today, 2019, where I'm a little bit critical of Moltmann because of his kind of thinking of progress, and he's thinking of linear progress, and the kind of Hegelian idea that there is this kind of development of reason and progress. And you can, as a theologian, say that, okay, Christ is this spirit of progress and also reason for hope, but of course then as a kind of, especially because I work a lot with non-theologians, I work a lot with philosophers and social scientists, and then you shouldn't mention Christ in the first sentence when you are with philosophers, so especially if you are appealing to reason, so my reason for hope is Christ. It doesn't ring a bell in this kind of very secularized academic community. So I start with sustainability and recycling and the idea that it's not so much Hegelian progress anymore, it's keeping the same level and recurring the same, recycling the materials so that we have, like in more Indian religions, this kind of circular flow of time. And if I say, look at young people, whether they want to somehow flourish and feel the earth in kind of terms of linear multiplication, at least in Sweden, Finland, Norway, this is not the case, but you are very careful of how to bring about the next generation, so to say. So maybe maybe my reason for hope is also this taking very seriously kind of circular movements in sustainable and recyclable life, and this kind of modesty and humility in times of uncertainty. But of course, I mean, Maltman is like a vast ocean, and this is like a small bay in the side of that ocean.
Yeah, you also said in your speech that when we do small actions, we commit to actions, then the hope is growing there. Did I get you right? This liberation theological, it's not theology, it's actually theological method. You can transfer it from one place to other. You can do feminist theology, you can do contextual theology, etc. But the method is that you first commit yourself to the poor, to the women. And the second step is then theology. The second step, critical reflection after commitment. So I was kind of listening to your idea of hope, that when you have this action of commitment and action, then the hope is growing. But I would say, from the wisdom theological point of view, that Christ is my hope and my only hope, and vulnerable God, because there you have the inner experience, or your spiritual life, or whatever. But I would say to my friend who is leader of the Islamic congregation here, and he says that that's great, and he gives me the Quran. So we have been sharing a lot of this, that when we are Christian, we should also be open like they are open to us. So in that scheme, not in scientific, I think it's good to be honest with your beliefs, and also inside.
Well, there are room for 2 questions. There in the middle, and then I saw Beata here.
Thank you very much, both of you, for your talks. My question was about the topic of vulnerability, and you mentioned in the research of a colleague who I believe you translated the book, that vulnerability in some situations is perceived as a weakness. So I'm just wondering, for those of us perhaps who are more aware of vulnerability as a potential strength, how do we communicate that effectively to the settings where it is very firmly of the mindset that vulnerability is a weakness? And how can we maybe move beyond that to introduce that to those sectors?
That's an excellent question. The theorists like Heike Springhart, they always say that it's an ambivalent concept. It is a strength and it is a weakness, and you have something, especially in some American circles today, where this is very much in fashion to speak of vulnerability, that you kind of exaggerate your vulnerability to the utmost extent, that you are vulnerable to everything. So when you see cartoon figure with some strange feature, you are kind of feeling vulnerable, and you demand it should be taken out of libraries because you are vulnerable to it, and it can be kind of exaggerated. So I'm not just saying that when we are when we are aware of our vulnerability, so then we are kind of have empathy and have openness to meet new kinds of and different persons from ourselves. But I am saying that, and I think this is the talk of wounds already in the Latin tradition, that being wounded is a kind of metaphor for that kind of weakness which has the opportunity of recovery and also the opportunity of understanding others through this hardship you are going through, and to say to others that there is this opportunity for recovery. So this is the strength in this ambivalent notion, but obviously the question is also very hard in the sense that if you are thinking about President Putin or President Erdogan, so if you are going to meet them on the basis of vulnerability, so that doesn't work. So it's not a general medicine, or it's not a. It is a political concept. It's very much, for instance, we have in Finland some professors of market economy who have published extensive studies how good is it for a kind of business company leader to be vulnerable, because that is in the kind of post-modern market where everything is dependent on the capacities of individuals and their kind of social capital. So the director of such company of experts need to have this kind. So even in running big things, you should have this kind of openness. But of course, I would say maybe the short answer is that it's one tool in the kind of toolbox of leadership. It's one tool in the kind of toolbox of negotiation.
Yeah. And then there was Beatrice's question.
Yeah, the last one.
The last one.
There you go.
Thank you. Where I'm from Hungary, it's said it's a capitalistic country now. It's a bit different. I mean, it's different than these countries here. Anyway, my question is that I'm reading and researching sacrifice and suffering recently, and sometimes I find it's problematic that the people, they don't sacrifice and they don't want to suffer, they want to avoid suffering, and in this way there is no hope for change, because sometimes the suffering or the challenges and creates the sacrifice in society or also in an individual. When there is something happening like a war or a pandemic, it's just really bothering your comfort zone. It's even actually not just a comfort zone, it's also deep inside the core of the person. So these kind of events can give us hope that finally we are going to move towards some solution and not just sitting and we don't want to sacrifice. I mean, it's not going to happen anything. So maybe it's actually a chance for hope against climate changes and all other things as well.
Maybe I'll start and Monica can then continue. So, as you know, in English language you have like two different concepts. You have the concept of victim and the concept of sacrifice. Concept of victim refers more to the person and concept of sacrifice more to the event. And you have this ambivalent notion of modern English like victimization, that you are making yourself a victim very kind of in order to pursue some end. And that's at least ambivalent or not problematic, if not problematic. But I think what you are saying is very much in keeping what the Swedish Archbishop Jackelén says in her Hope book, that in times like pandemic and in times of suffering, the only way forward is that inevitably these processes of sacrifice are something that you need to go through. Then the accent is not in your personality, but the accent is in this process in which you cannot win everything all the time, but you are also losing. and maybe losing for the sake of someone else for the so-called beneficiary, which is in the theory of sacrifice. So I think it's important to see the difference of these two concepts, and I personally affirm this kind of sacrifice as process in times of hardship very, very much.
Yeah, in that idea of mission for the margins, there is the idea that those in the center, they have to empty themselves from privileges. And somehow I think that when we are together in difficulties like Corona, or we are all together wanting peace to come, it combines us in a way which never ever actually then happened before. So we are all together in the same process in a way. And like Europe is now united in a way which it wasn't before. Hopefully then we can continue also with Russia this process, but it takes time. So yeah, something to go forward is to, yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts, especially guys. We want to thank them here, MariAnna and Risto. So that's why I said to Stephen. Yeah. And it's nice that we have got some intellectual gymnastics this afternoon, and we are happy to have you here and you shared your thoughts, and all the people. I think we all are committed to university and committed to students, and we want to do some action-oriented hope. We want to do actions that are oriented towards hope and do create hope with the students in the universities that we are working. Thank you for this session, and I think there is some information. Yeah.
Before that, we'd like to thank. Thank you for your presentations and discussion. It was very inspiring. A lot of new ideas to bring back home to our everyday work as chaplains. We have some gifts to both of you. First, the new anniversary book of our European organization.
Oh,
It's just published. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lisa, also. Thank you very much. She was preparing.
So, back into information.
Back to the fun stuff.
Yeah. Thank you for your speeches. It was really interesting. Now it's time for the information about the bar as well. Latte, are you